Okay, so last week, Gordo Games held its Win-a-box, and James managed to come second with his two-color control good stuff security deck. So he's going to show off the deck profile for you and explain a little bit about his matchups and how he put together what he thought was the best deck possible. So why don't you go ahead, James, and show us what you were playing?
Yeah, so I ended up going 3-0-1 in the winner box with a yellow-red kind of security control deck. And I'll run you through some of the cards now. So to start off with, for the babies, fairly typical for yellow, we had 4 Cupimon, slide up here, and one of the Upamon. The idea of the deck is obviously to recover a lot of security, and for that reason, the Cupimon came in clutch most of the time really early game to start stocking my hand up or chipping away at my opponent's security stack. And then the Upamon was just to pad it out so that I had 5 because this deck does tend to go very long. For rookies, we only ran 6. So we ran the 4 Recovery Salamon. Early game, like I said, this is just a draw on top of the Cupimon. And then into the kind of later game or against the aggro matches like Rookie Rush and Impildramon, you just sit on it and then raise it and swing to take the extra recovery. The other 2 that we ran were just 2 copies of Patamon. This never really came into play as a drop down, but it does synergize really well with one of the cards I'll show you later, which will free play it.
Which Patamon's that?
This is the promo Patamon. So
Okay.
on play, if you have one or fewer security cards, it triggers recovery +1.
Okay.
So again, it's another part of this kind of just continue to recover through your opponent's attacks and just keep your security as high as possible. And because of that, we ran quite a hefty security package. We ran 4 of the 5-drop Magna Angemon. This card, when you play it for 7, it just triggers recovery +1. So we're just adding another card to that security stack there. And then what we're looking to do normally on turns 1 and 2 is play down Magna Angemon and then go onto the next turn straight into Seraphimon, which then gives us another recovery +1 when we digivolve, and also if we have 3 or more security, we get security attack +1. It's very often in this deck that you can have like 7, 8, or 9 security, which actually means the Magna Angemon inheritable comes into play with this, giving you +1, 2, or 3k, and very often he's a 13k, swinging in for security +1, so it doesn't get checked by a lot of stuff. So it's a lot of early pressure. To round it off towards the late game, I like to kind of stack my hand and try and keep the Magnadramons in my hand. And then while our opponents are pushing towards trying to get us down to game, every time they hit us below 3, we'll play Magnadramon, and we might chain this off 2 or 3 turns in a row. So what this does is if I have 3 or fewer security, when I play it for 11, I get to recover 2. And this card then ties in really nicely with this Patamon. If it stays on board and it's not answered, when I swing with it, I can play one of the rookies out for free. And obviously, if we're playing this Patamon, I play it for free and I still get recovery +1 if I've only got 1 security. So very often I had turns where I'd play this, recover 2 to go back up to 4 or 5. My opponent would knock me all the way back down to 1 with the pressure. I'd swing, I'd play a Patamon, go back up to 2, and then play another one and go up to 4 again. And the best bit about that is while my opponent's trying to provide that pressure onto my security, as you'll see in a minute, the option cards that I run are just dealing with their cards 1 for 1 over and over again. We also ran 1 copy of the Angelwoman. This card is when digivolving. If you have 3 or less security, you can trigger recovery +1, and he goes over the security Digimon. Because we're only actually running 4 level 4s, that's why I've only got 1 of these. And lastly, for a bit of control to go with the recovery package, 2 Slash. Slash is one of the only outs the deck currently has to 12 and 15Ks. And you effectively have to sit on a level 5. And if you know your opponent's playing like Omnimon, for example, wait for them to swing and then evolve into the slash and swing over the Omnimon. Otherwise, you're going to be dealing with an Omnimon swing every single turn for the rest of the game. Initially, when I first built this deck, we were very much just on this yellow top end, and it made the deck quite difficult to deal with like the long matchups like Shine Greymon, for example. So what we did is we've splashed in 3 of the Sylphimon. This guy is purely either hard play or goes on top of our security Digimon, which I'll show in a minute. We're not worried about the effects. They never came into play during the tournament, and they never have in testing as well. But what he does is he lets us go into Gallantmon. So against decks like Shine, I will build a full chain all the way up to Gallantmon in my security. I just control the board, and I will end up with a Gallantmon player with between 20 and 30 cards in their discard pile. And then we just raise the Gallantmon on the turn and make them pitch 2 to 3 security and get in for the final swing all in one go. It's actually really gross.
It sounds filthy.
Yeah, it really is, because very often the way that when people see this in the raising area as well, what they do is they stick a blocker down. So if they do give you 4, which sometimes happens, most people try and cap you at 3, then you can raise this before you bring the Gallantmon out and just pop the blocker with Gallamon's effect. Because if you have the red tamer in play, it deletes 6k or less. So you pop the blocker and then he takes in 3 or 4 swings basically, unchecked. One of the other ways that we kind of get into our level 5s and apply pressure and definitely control the rookie rush matchup is with the 4 Ankylamon. We're looking to just kind of hopefully hit this guy out of our security, and then he comes into play as a 4K, and then we just start swinging, picking off the board and using him for control, or using him for cheap evolves to go up the chain, rather than hard casting the level 5s. I also found, as much as people think it feels really bad, that when I'm getting put at 3 or 4 memory and I want to starve my opponent, I'm just hard casting this and putting them back on 1 and 2. Because this deck's very, very reactive. So, like, understanding that sometimes you just pass, and you don't have to give your opponent like 9 or 10 memory every turn, and you just pass and you just wait for your opponent to swing into your security, because they've got to at some point. And when you're sat at 9, you don't really care what they're doing. So with all the recovery, obviously we've got to make our security count. So we run the best 1-for-1 card in the game, which is 4 Gaia Force. This card, just from either your hand or your security, is just unconditionally delete one of your opponent's Digimon. We also run 4 copies of Eden's Javelin. This card's brilliant, especially if you hit it out of your security, because it's a free draw 1. And then for each card in your hand, you can give one of your opponents Digimon minus 1k. Very often, you're sat on a stack between like 8 and 10k when you hit this, so it's clearing off most level 5s. And in matchups where you know people are going to be rushing into like 12ks, like against red and against green, you can try and stack your hand so that this deals with the 12ks, because these are the only 2 kind of cards that do. We also run 3 Seven Heavens, which from security gives Digimon minus 10k. Or if I'm casting it from hand, what I'm looking to do with these is kill any chain that has security attack plus 1 underneath it. What beats this deck incredibly well is chains that have security attack plus 1, security attack plus 2, etc. Because we're looking to 1-for-1 with every card we play and every security we have. So anything that somehow gets round that or takes more value than a 1-for-1 can be a really big threat to the deck. Red tie, just saying. We also run 2 Holy Waves. This card is a 6 cost and it's trigger recovery plus 1, and it does the same from your security. In all honesty, it's awful in your hand and does absolutely nothing, but it can really, really screw with kind of combat mass for your opponent when they think they're going for game, and all of a sudden you're recovering one out of nowhere. And that has stopped my opponents beating me on several occasions having these in, and because like they swing into this as the last security and you recover one, and then you get recovering like a Gaia Force or a Seven Heaven, which deals with the next threat, and it's just sad times for them and happy days for you. We've got a little bit of tech for Rookie Rush, Impildramon, that kind of stuff. We run a couple of Lightning Paws. This card's so I put it in initially as tech for those decks, but actually after game one, what people tried to do was go wide on me. So all of a sudden you've got like red and green decks just slamming down 3 or 4 rookies, and then you just Lightning Paw and you get a 2 or 3 for 1. And at that point it's basically game over. So this card did so much work. We also run 1 copy of Blade of the True. This card went from like 3 to 2 all the way down to 1. What it does is it's a 2 cost, and it's trigger draw 1 card from your deck for every 2 security you had. So the logic behind this was initially hoping that we'd have this early game and you could draw 2 or 3 cards for 2 cost and just starve your opponent of memory while you're setting up your hand to deal with their threats. But what I found with like multiple copies is they often ended up in like the last 2 security, and this is not what you want to be hitting when your opponent's swinging at you with pressure. So I took it all the way down to 1, just because it's only really good on like your first or second turn, and after that it's pretty much a dead card. We also just won the 1 copy of Plasma Strike, which delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 13,000 DP or more. On your turn, it's pretty much only good for dealing with Millennialmon and Omnimons. And on the opponent's turn, it actually snaps quite a lot of stuff. With all the extra kind of DP boosts that your opponents get, this deals with most level 6s and 7s fairly comfortably. So it's a nice little one-off, but when I started with 3 of them, it felt really clunky and didn't have a lot of chance to play them. And if you weren't running into the red matchups, it was just a dead card. To finish off, we have a couple of tamers. So we run yellow TK for the same kind of reasons that Shine does. Obviously, when we play it, we get to look at our security stack and take 1 yellow card and then recover 1. It lets us kind of manipulate what we're taking. We can take the rookie if we need it. We can take the recovery if we need it. Or we can even pull out something like an Eden's Javelin. Or very often I'd pull out the Blade of the True, because I don't want that in my security, just so I can card cast it the following turn. And it lets me set myself to 3 memory every turn, stops my opponent from starving me, which when you're hard casting stuff for 7 to 11 is quite huge. This deck doesn't function well on 1 memory. And lastly, we just run 2 of the red tie. This card enables Gallantmon, it enables the Gaia Force from your hand, but it is also really huge in the Rookie Rush matchup, in that it allows like the Ankylamon to now start swinging over the 4K rookies and not die. And it also lets the rookies trade, our 2K rookies trade with their 3K rookies. It lets the Magna Angemon now go over the top of like a Gorillamon. So it just pushes most of our things that we're hard casting just enough DP over the top of the Rookie Rush deck. And then if they want to trade back into it and trade another Digimon for it on the next turn, then I'm more than happy. So that's the kind of that's the deck laid out for you there. Have you got any questions about it?
Well, how about you discuss your matchups from the tournament? What did you play against? And you had that 1 draw. What was that against?
Yeah, so I can't honestly tell you the order in which I played against each deck, but I played 1 round against Rookie Rush, which was a 2-0. I mean, Rookie Rush is the epitome of the deck that wants to like 1-for-1 your security, and when I also want them to 1-for-1 my security, but I recover 10 plus security in a game, they're never beating this. This deck just absolutely destroys Rookie Rush in every sense, because they don't run the jammers, they just run 4 of them. And all of the recovery on top of that, they just can't deal with it. And as soon as you sit like one of your level 6s or something like that, then they have a very hard time clearing it from the board. So that matchup's like really nice for this deck. Likewise, I played in Pilgrimon, which I won 2-0. Slightly harder when they play the jammers down and they don't hit the options cards and they start hitting all of your Digimon in your security. So that's a little bit more security dependent. But at the same time, you just sit on your Gaia Forces until they go into Impildramon and Gaia Force that, and you trade whatever you're playing into their Digimon. Just keep their board low while trying to recover your security, because their first couple of turns are the most explosive. And if you can take away that kind of momentum from them, then you can just keep recovering, and eventually you win out of attrition. They run out of cards in their hand, which happens quite a lot, actually. And then you can give them 11 because they have nothing to play. They just play 2 rookies and pass. Brilliant. The third round I played was against Red Omnimon. Red Omnimon matchup, like I was saying, can be really, really scary because they tend to play a lot of security attack +1 cards. And if they play the tamers that also give security attack +1, then very often they'll be getting a swing that takes 2 or 3 security, and you may not deal with what they're doing, especially if they're rushing up to cards with like 12k DP, because you'll see that most of our security options don't check them. I was slightly fortunate in that every time my opponent went into a card that had security attack +1, I had an answer. So I either had a Gaia Force, or I'd take out the level 5 chain with the security attack +1 with a 7th Heaven before he could push it into something that was harder for my deck to deal with, which kind of forced him into playing out of his raising area, which is fine for me. I don't mind that. If they're slowing down to do that, then we're happy. So that was another 2-0. The hardest matchup of the day was the matchup which I drew, which was green. The problem this deck has with green is green does a lot with very little memory. So if they're going all the way up into a level 6 chain and I Gaia Force it, they can basically hard cast a level 3 and go all the way back up into another level 6 with the amount of memory that I'm giving them. And also Ceresmon is really difficult for this deck because we're wanting to hard cast our level 5s. And normally that would mean that we're passing the turnover with giving them 2 or 3 memory at least. They just rest it with Ceresmon and kill it on the next turn, so it's very difficult to establish a board. So in that game, I have to hold Ankyomons, I have to hold Patamons and Salamons, and I have to try and build a chain in my raising area while dealing with their board, and then hoping something like Gallantmon is going to put in enough pressure towards the end to deal with them, which is what happened in game 1. But in game 2, my opponent established 2 Ceresmons really early on, and I just couldn't deal with the amount of value that they were giving him. And each one was just a free 12k swing every turn, and we didn't hit a Gaia Force. So he dealt with us pretty well.
All right. What about the Shine Greymon matchup? How's the deck dealing with that?
So we've play tested Shine Greymon, and I've played in locals against Shine Greymon quite a few times. I haven't lost yet to Shine Greymon, but I've managed to deck out Shine Greymon 3 out of the 4 games that we've played at locals. Again, the key against Shine is to kill off the Rise Greymons that will end up giving the level 6 security attack +1. Because Shine's kind of a slow setup deck, you want to get in as much. You have to kind of make a judgment based on your hand. If you've got a few rookies and they've Lotmond once, you want to get in as much early pressure as you can. If it's looking like they haven't got the Lotmon, they're still sat at 5, then I just leave them there. I deal with their threats and I slowly build up a board. And then before the turn where they're going to go into their level 5, I'll just swing as much security out as I can. And then I'll just build from the raising area for the late game. But the deck does have just enough recovery and enough cards to basically trade with Shine's threats 1-for-1. But you always get to a point where you can't just hard cast and establish a card because Shine will remove it. and that's when you have to switch to your raising area and try and build something in there to provide pressure for the later game, or just deck them out. They draw a lot. That's not really the game plan, but that seems to be what happens quite a lot.
It
Often.
works, so yeah.
Yeah, Shine draws a lot of cards. And I mean, as this kind of deck and this style gets more popular and people have seen the list, then you'll see people trying to hard play level 5s, level 6s a lot more, like towards the middle of the game, because they know that you're just kind of waiting for them to digivolve over and over and over again, draw cards and deck out. And then you have to change the way that you're playing. But with a surprise factor, normally people realize too late. And all of a sudden they like count their deck and they've got 5 or 6 cards left, and you're like, you can still deal with their board for another 3 or 4 turns, and they're going to deck out, and you don't even have to think about winning through security.
And is there any changes you're going to be making going forward, or are you quite happy with how the list is at the moment?
I think the list is fairly solid. Like, the biggest issue the list has is when someone turbos into 12Ks. And as you can see, looking at the list, there's not a lot of stuff that just immediately deals with it. And I don't think with where we are at the moment with kind of BT 1, 2, and 3, there is any cards that just straight up deal with it. Like the most obvious card would be Glorious Burst. But in testing, that's normally I'm giving them. I might have 1 tamer down, 2 at most when I'm Glorious Bursting, so it costs 7. And also, if I'm hitting it out of security, I'm really sad because this deck wants to do stuff with every single security check.
Yeah.
So having a card that's effectively dead in your security just kind of defeats the purpose of what this is trying to do.
All right. Well, thank you. That's been really good. I'm hoping we see more from this going forward. I know we've had more people playing it at our locals after your success.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with next.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Shh, not a zombie channel.